A metal tray slammed to the floor. Food splattered across Nora's boots. Someone shoved her hard from behind, enough to make her stumble into the steel counter. Laughter exploded all around, quick and ugly. "Pick it up, supply rat!" She crouched, hands shaking, scooping mashed potatoes with her bare hands. A phone camera hovered. "Hey, show us that loser tattoo!" She tucked her wrist away, but another boot nudged her side. "Let's see it, poser. Who gave you the eagle, your boyfriend?" Heat rushed to her face. She kept her head down, refusing to answer. A soldier stepped in close, voice low but sharp. "Move! We've got real work to do. People like you, just get in the way." The mess line shifted, closing in. Nobody helped. Nobody said a word. Suddenly, the room went still. Boots struck the floor, louder, heavier than the rest. A shadow swept over her. She froze, still crouched on the ground, surrounded by their laughter. Then a voice. Calm, absolute. "Private Hale." She looked up. Commander Calder stood over her, eyes hard. He raised his hand in a salute, slow and deliberate, holding it until every whisper died away. The laughter vanished. Why would a commander salute the only person on her knees? And in that moment, when a room full of uniforms couldn't see what mattered. Maybe you did. Some heroes wear their scars in silence. If you believe courage isn't always loud, subscribe. Ever seen someone everyone overlooked rise anyway? Share their story below. They still laughed after the salute. Maybe more. When people can't explain something, they turn it into a joke, and there was nothing easier than laughing at a quiet woman who didn't fight back. The clip made the rounds in the barracks. Nora on her knees, Calder's hand frozen mid-salute. 100 mouths open, and then suddenly, shut. Someone slowed the video and added caption text at the bottom. "Private nobody gets VIP treatment." Nora didn't watch it. She didn't have to. She could feel it playing in the way conversations stopped when she walked by, in the stares that stuck just long enough to sting, in the way the nickname bloomed across dry erase boards and locker doors. Poster girl. It wasn't creative, but humiliation never needed to be. She buried herself in work, inventory, pallets, counts, checks and double checks. The things no one noticed until they went wrong. She stayed late on purpose. The barracks were loud at midnight and quiet at 2. Quiet was easier. Quiet didn't ask questions. At the weapon cages one evening, a rifle jammed during routine maintenance. A corporal cursed, slammed it against the bench for luck that wasn't coming. Nora happened to pass with a clipboard. She didn't think. Her hands went where they always went. Tap, eject, inspect. The sharp little sound of a round kissing the tray. She set the rifle down, cleared, ready, before her mind had caught up. The corporal blinked. "Who taught you that?" Nora kept her eyes on the clipboard. "Just read the manual," she said, and walked on. He knew manuals didn't teach that motion. Most people did, but it was easier to believe she'd gotten lucky than to believe there was something about her they didn't understand. They hit her locker next. Poster girl scrawled in marker, the outline of an eagle with one wing crooked drawn over the vents. Someone had a sense of humor. She peeled the paper off and folded it twice, then twice again, and slid it in her pocket. Not to keep, just to remove. A small, stubborn act, like sweeping a floor no one believed needed sweeping. Nora never explained the tattoo. You don't explain a thing you promised to keep. There are vows that stick to the inside of your ribs, like secrets made of wire. The night air from far-off years still found her sometimes. The helicopter rotors beating a canyon into a clock she couldn't slow. the radio spitting nothing but hiss, the ridgeline burning as if the sky had dropped to touch it. Somewhere inside that memory, a hand had taken her wrist, warm with its own blood, and a voice had rasped, "Never speak. Carry the mark, that's enough." So she carried it. Quietly. She carried it when she signed forms, when she pushed a pallet jack, when she counted 960 rounds and found 959 and thought about how easily a tiny mistake could get someone killed. She worked the numbers like penance and made sure they were honest. She turned the lights off last. She turned them on first. She told no one why. He left a valve half open after refueling a Humvee, and the sharp, sweet bite of fuel caught in the throat like a warning you couldn't swallow. Nora was on perimeter check, punishment that had become habit, and heard the hiss in the dark. She didn't call it in. There wasn't time. She cut the valve hard, shoved the rookie back, and slapped his lighter out of a twitchy hand before it could complete a flick. He stared like a dog that had nearly chased a truck into the next life. I didn't. Next time you check twice. He nodded way too fast. Shame is a good teacher if it doesn't get you killed first. She reached into her pocket, found a crumpled square of paper, poster girl, and pressed it into his palm. "Throw it away for me." He did. The bass held its breath for a beat that night, and then let it go without drama. No explosions, no fines, no reports. Nora didn't write it up. She cleaned quiet with quiet. Lee and Danner weren't cruel. They were young. They carried the same doubts everyone carries before the first real scare scrubs you down to what you are. Lee pretended not to watch Nora. He watched anyway. He saw the way her eyes tracked not the nearest thing, but the most dangerous. He saw the way her hands settled on a job like they were matching old grooves. He saw her shoulders relax right before a job got hard, as if the hard part was the point. "Where'd you learn that clearing motion?" he asked one afternoon, trying to make the question sound like it wasn't real. "Manuals," she said again. He smiled, a little mean with the part of himself that wanted to be someone else. "Right, manuals." Danner elbowed him later. "She saved Diaz from the spill," he said. "Maybe lay off?" Lee shrugged. "Or maybe he's making things up." "Maybe," Danner said, and didn't sound like he believed it. People remember what they want. They forget what they need to forget. They took her name off the next drill roster without saying why. She went to the office to correct it and found the admin desk empty, a single folder lying open like a book that had given up on being read. She closed it and filled out her own form again, left it on top. Calder was in the hallway, hands behind his back, reading the walls like they told stories. He didn't stop her. He didn't speak. But his gaze paused just long enough to feel like a touch on the shoulder. In the ops room, a week after the salute, Nora let a phrase slip out that tasted like dust and sleep deprivation. She was cross-checking an equipment list for the third time, and the numbers didn't agree with the world. The words came out in a sigh that wasn't meant for anyone. "Kadesh Protocol, 2 and 1? Calder's head tilted like someone had tapped the side of a compass. He didn't say anything then. He didn't have to. The pause said enough. The quiet said the rest. The alarm started as sound and ended as a hole in sound. A siren got halfway to a scream and swallowed itself. The lights hiccuped, coughed, and died. The hum of the bass. Generators, fans, refrigeration, every little tame machine faded like a parade leaving town. EMP, someone said, trying to make it not true by naming it. Doors that liked to open didn't. Radios turned into paperweights with antennae. The dark didn't become total. The desert never lets it. But it became the kind of dark that shortens your reach by inches and makes every inch count. Nora didn't hesitate. She found Lee by the shoulder, found Danner by the shirt. "Stay with me," she said, steady as if the lights were still on. "Lee on my left, Danner on my 6. Hands on the wall. Count your steps." Her palm slid along corrugated steel, finding the seam where Supply B met the loading bay. She crouched, tore a strip of flex wire from a busted pallet, looped, tied, clipped it ankle-high between a forklift tine and the leg of a rolling rack. "Trip at knee," she whispered. "When it goes, you move. On 3. Outside, metal screamed like it was remembering being ore. A voice barked commands. Another voice, closer, hissed a word that turned Nora's stomach. Ledger. The past had a mean habit of not staying past. She breathed in through her nose, out through her teeth. 1, 2, 3. The wire sang and snapped. A body crashed to concrete. Nora went first, dropped to a knee, drove her shoulder into something heavy. The breath flew out of a man with a wet grunt. Another shape lunged. Lee swung a crate lid like a bat and clipped him high. Danner, heart beating too loud for the room, dropped a steel pin on the tank. Metal screamed. The attacker flinched. Nora grabbed his sleeve and yanked, felt fabric tear, turned him with the momentum, and took him off his feet. "Left," she hissed. Lee didn't see the third until the heat of a forearm cinched under Nora's jaw and dragged her backward. Her boots scrabbled. She slammed her heel down, found only air, a rolling dolly. The man locked the choke. Vision collapsed to a gray rim. Fingers scrabbled for anything. Dust, a tag, anything. "Lee!" Danner wheezed. "Move!" Lee lunged and missed, banged an elbow into the rack. The man tightened. Nora went loose on purpose, dumped her weight straight down. The forearm slipped just enough. She drove the back of her head into his face. Bone on bone, a dull thud, and the grip broke. Air rushed in like cold water. Lee recovered enough to grab a fire extinguisher off the wall and crack it across the man's ribs. The cylinder rang like a bell. The attacker folded with a sigh he probably hated himself for. Lee snagged the attacker's sling and yanked him off balance. Just enough. 2 down, Danner whispered, new to counting like this. "Not done," Nora said. "Listen." They stilled. Hearing became the whole job. Boots skated on something. Oil, grease, a gift from earlier carelessness. "Grease patch," she murmured. "Whoever spilled it, thanks." Another pair hit the smear, and the floor took them both. Danner made a sound that wanted to be a laugh, and remembered not to be. Nora slid low, scraped her knuckles, found a wrist, twisted until she felt a shoulder vote against the plan. The man yelped, kicked wild. She placed her knee and leaned, and the fight poured out of him. "Don't be a hero," she breathed. "Not tonight." A fourth figure came clean, learned from the others, hugged the far wall. Nora didn't see him. She felt the air change. "Right side," she said, and Lee stepped into empty space. The man flowed under Lee's arms, grabbed the rifle, tried to lever him into the rack. Metal shrieked like a thing offended. Danner charged, too slow to change anything but the math of it. Nora went horizontal. Shoulders to concrete, she slid the last meter and scissored her legs. Impact. The man pitched. They went down in a knot of limbs and canvas and teeth. He freed a fist. It cracked her cheekbone. Light popped behind her eyes. Iron in her mouth, the old taste. "Back off," she wheezed. "Give me." His hand found a knife. Her hand found it first. "No," she said, and meant it with all the rooms inside her. She fed the blade back into the space he'd made. Not deep, not to end a human life, just enough to end this moment. He hissed, surrendered, palm open in a shape his pride would remember. "Zip," she said. Danner jammed a cable tie into her hand. They bound wrists, ankles, mouths. The hallway remembered how to be quiet again. Only their breath and a far-off thump like someone knocking on the perimeter road. "Count," Nora said. "3," Lee whispered. "Maybe 4 if the first one wakes up." "Won't," Nora said. Her hands shook once, hard enough that the cable tie chattered against the rack. She pressed her wrist to the floor until the shake ran away into concrete. A shadow took shape at the end of the row. Not hunting. Waiting. Deliberate boots. A red lens beam slid across the floor, settled on the pooled grease, lifted to faces, clicked off. "On me?" a low voice said. Not to them. "Hold," Nora breathed. "Friendlies." The light didn't come back, but the presence did, close enough to be a weight. "Hail," Commander Calder said softly, as if the name answered a question. "You good?" She started to say yes, and what came out first was a swallow. "Fine." "Beat." "2 secured, 1 compliant." "Anyone else?" She tipped her head toward the dark. They used Ledger for movement. Kadesh Protocol 2 and 1. Old words, older than her life here, fell out of her mouth like she'd never stopped using them. The room took a breath and held it. Calder didn't answer for a heartbeat. She couldn't see his eyes, but weight travels in voice. "Copy," he said, flat for anyone listening. Then lower, just for her. Only Aegis carried that phrase, and survived. She didn't look up. The ink under her skin felt like a coal. For a second, the canyon wind was in her ears again. The radio a joke. The taste of copper on a name she still wouldn't say. "Orders?" Lee asked, because if he didn't talk, he was going to shake apart. Nora inhaled. Dust. Grease. Fear. "We hold this corridor," she said. "We don't chase, we make them come to us." Calder's silhouette tilted, a nod you could feel. "You heard her," he told the shapes behind him. "Lock it down. Quietly." They stacked crates into a low wall, slid the forklift sideways, turned the dolly into a trip hazard you couldn't see until too late. Nora sketched fields of fire with her finger on the floor. Chalk only she could see. "Breathe," she told Lee. "Count 3, exhale, squeeze." Movement again. 2 shadows, testing. "Now," she said. The wire sang. The first went down and took the second. 3 shots, 2 from Calder's side, 1 from someone further back who had decided to be brave. Boots retreated into the dark. A cheer rose outside, thin and embarrassed by itself, and died the way sensible cheers die in dangerous places. Dawn found the base cradling its bruises. Medics patched what could be patched. Supply counted what could be counted. A forklift bore a new dent that would probably never be explained to anyone's satisfaction. Nora emptied pockets onto a bench. A snapped tag, a cable tie, a smear of grease that looked like a fingerprint from the dark. She wiped her cheek with a clean cloth and left a small rust-colored crescent in the weave. Calder gathered the survivors by the shattered loading bay, not for speeches, he didn't make many, but because being seen matters when you've just been introduced to the worst parts of your job. He didn't look up at the roof or out at the horizon or into the cameras that weren't on. He looked at Nora. She followed protocol, he said, so everyone could hear. We didn't. No Kaya 2WIA, patched and breathing. No one clapped. The sound that came back was softer and heavier. The sound a crowd makes when shame and gratitude find the same seat. The rookies who had filmed her in the chow line found suddenly urgent business elsewhere. The paper on her locker disappeared without anyone asking. The way men carry themselves around someone changes when that someone shows them how not to die. Lee waited until the medics were done pretending they weren't scared. He found Nora by the fuel yard, where she'd always been on the nights nobody wanted. He stood there too long without speaking, and then spoke too fast to fix it. "If you hadn't been there," Nora lifted a hand. "If I hadn't been there, someone else would have," she said. Lee shook his head like a man trying to shake off sleep. "No, I wouldn't." I froze. "You moved," she said. "That's what counts. Next time you move sooner." He nodded. His mouth worked around a question he wasn't sure he had permission to ask. "Were you ever scared?" "Every time," she said. No hero speech, no shrug. Simple like the truth can be on the right day. But fear's the first thing, not the last. They stood in the oily morning, and the base went on being a base, which is to say, nothing in it matched a postcard, and everything in it mattered. The investigation did what investigations do. It asked questions that made sense on paper. It asked them in a room that had no windows and smelled faintly of coffee left too long on a burner. It used words like incident and breach and exemplary and commendation. It asked Nora if she'd accept a medal. "Did you engage with lethal force?" I stopped what needed stopping. She signed the form back across the table with a neat, impersonal block hand. "Declined." The colonel's brow creased without moving the rest of his face. "You're sure?" It wasn't a question. "If you want to honor me," she said, not unkind, "take care of the families we left behind." "Which families are those, Private?" She could have said the name of a unit that didn't officially die because it never officially lived. She didn't. She touched her wrist with the tips of 2 fingers, a gesture that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't paid for it in a particular currency. "You know which ones." Sometimes rank means telling the truth. Sometimes it means understanding it without being told. He nodded. The meeting ended. Something shifted after the paperwork. Quiet things. The base memorial got a new plaque with the right number of spaces in it, and no one noticed except the people who always notice. Family support funds reactivated with a memo that explained nothing and changed enough. Calder added a paragraph to the new recruit brief. No names, just a reminder that protocol isn't a word, it's a promise. He stopped her at a doorway one afternoon. The light behind him made a silhouette of the man people believed he was. He held out a patch, worn to colorless at the edges by fingers that hadn't kept it for long enough. He didn't pin it. He didn't let it shine. He just set it in her hand like you set a stone back where a river can find it. "This is yours to carry," he said. "Not everyone can." Nora weighed it, small and heavy at the same time. "I'm not the only one." His mouth almost smiled. "No, but most of them aren't here to argue." She slid the patch under the sweatband of her cap and didn't wear it where pictures could see. Some honors aren't for that. The days resumed a rhythm that looked ordinary from the outside. Requisitions and verifications. The arithmetic of keeping people fed and armed and ready. It's not spectacular work, but spectacular is a bad word in places where the cost of spectacle is blood. Lee started staying late without announcing it like a virtue. He asked about radios and field repairs and what to do when your hands won't stop shaking the first time you realize the shaking could get someone killed. Danner ran inventory like it was a sport you could get in shape for. They learned how to set a tripwire blindfolded and how to hear the difference between fear and danger in a man's breath. They learned to say protocol like it tasted good, not like it was a chore. Nora gave them methods, and not too many reasons. She didn't talk about Aegis 2. She didn't talk about the canyon that still bled a wind through her sleep. She didn't talk about the way a dying man's grip can leave a bruise you carry years later like an extra bone. She didn't talk about any of it because promises aren't stories, they're work, and she had work. A letter arrived, then another. Families. The handwriting wavered like a hand that wanted to do the right thing and didn't trust itself not to break. Thank you for remembering him, for not letting his name go silent. Nora kept the letters folded tight in her footlocker, tucked beside the patch Calder had given back, and the old coins someone had pressed into her palm years ago, not as recognition, but as a way of saying, "You aren't carrying this alone." She didn't read them often. Grief doesn't need to be stirred to stay warm. Sometimes she took the locker key and turned it in her fingers without unlocking anything, like turning a thought over without using it up. Anyone could chart the change in Redwater by the way jokes died when they should die. No one scrawled poster girl anymore. No one filmed the chow line hoping for a humiliation they could share. The spirit of the place had learned something, that cruelty is a luxury ignored by the work at hand, and that the quiet ones who do the work aren't decorations for anyone's boredom. A sergeant on the far side of retirement with a knee that told the weather tried to apologize for not stepping in sooner. He found Nora by the loading ramp, fiddled with his cap, and said, "Should have said something that day." Nora shook her head. "You will next time." He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I will." It wasn't about her. It was about the man he wanted to be before he stopped wearing a uniform. That's a kind of honor, too. The base had one more scare that season. No breach, just a storm that rolled the sky onto the dirt and made every piece of metal ring in sympathy. The generators fought and then gave up like old men. Red lights turned the air into a wound. Lee found her in the warehouse, counting in the dark without a pen. "It's stupid," he said, laughing in the way people laugh when they need to prove they aren't scared. "I know it's stupid, but every time the lights die—" "I know," she said. "How do you make it stop?" "You don't." She thought about the canyon and the radio and the taste of sand in teeth that would break anyway. "You move anyway." He nodded like a student nods when the lesson isn't comforting and is real. They stood in the red light, listening to the sky make its noise. When the power came back, they both pretended they hadn't been waiting for it to do the right thing. Time worked on Redwater the way time works on everything. People rotated out. New faces rotated in with fresh bravado and the soft ears of the unscared. The story of the night the base went dark made its way around like stories do. Too fast, wrong in the details, right where it counted. That's how memory survives, messy and honest. The men who had shoved her in the chow line learned to walk a little wider in their own skins. One of them, months later, came to her at shift change with a jaw set for impact and said, "I was an idiot." She held his eyes for a beat. "Okay," she said. Not cruel, not forgiving in a way that made him clean. Just okay, which is all most of us deserve on a good day. Nora kept walking the perimeter in the long shadow of morning, boots sinking into old tire tracks that remembered every dull, necessary mile. Sometimes she paused at the edge of the motor pool and pressed her palm to the tattoo like a person checks a pocket before a long drive. The moon made its thin sky scratch. The wind tried out a hymn. She let the quiet take her and didn't ask it any questions. Calder changed too, in the way leaders change when they find a better shape for their authority. He didn't use Nora's name as a cudgel or a banner. He didn't sell her story to buy himself anything. He just made small decisions that added up to respect. He read reports more carefully. He asked the oldest sergeant what needed fixing before he asked the newest lieutenant for advice. He stopped in the yard, looked at the flag, then at the people who kept it up. He knew which mattered first. He never talked about Kadesh Ravine out loud, not even to Nora, and that was the largest respect of all. Some places don't belong in air. They offered the medal again in the spring, because institutions can be slow to hear the kind of no that isn't rudeness. Nora signed the refusal the same way, in the same hand, and added one sentence on a sticky note. Because sometimes shame needs help finding where to sit. If you want to give something, give it to the ones who can't ask. It got to the right desk. Money moved without anyone making a speech about it. 3 calls went out that week. Checks followed. No speeches. Someone from Family Services called 3 numbers that hadn't been called in too long. The right kind of quiet can travel farther than a parade. On her last week at Redwater before a transfer she hadn't requested and couldn't avoid. The military moves people like chess because chess pieces don't have heartbeats. Nora walked the route one more time. Lee walked with her, because that's what you do when someone who taught you how to breathe under pressure is about to go somewhere you can't follow. Do you think it ever gets lighter? He asked. What? The thing you carry. She thought about lying to give him a softer road. She didn't. Not lighter, she said. You just get stronger under it. He was quiet long enough for the answer to stick in the right place. I'm going to remember that, he said. You will, she said, when you tell it to someone else. They made the corner by the loading bay. The forklift was still listing a degree off-center like a ship that had forgiven its iceberg. A cable tie lay under a shelf as if the night had shed it and forgot to pick it up again. Lee bent to pocket it. Souvenir, he said, trying a smile. Protocol, she corrected, and he nodded, and it was not a joke. Sometimes, long after the heat fell out of the day and the base lights drew circles on the dust, Nora sat on the barracks steps and let the machine noise collapse into a comfortable hum. Young soldiers drifted back with their shoulders sunburned and their jokes better than they used to be. Every now and then, one would look her way with a question they didn't need to ask. She'd nod. That was enough. If you've ever known someone quiet and extraordinary, someone who lifted others not with speeches but with steady action, tell us who they are. Put their story in the comments so it doesn't disappear the way names can. If this is the kind of memory you want to keep alive, subscribe and help carry the mark forward. You don't serve for applause. You serve for the one next to you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to keep your promises in the dark where no one is watching. And that is enough.